Who is Lucien Agoume? We've got some positive news with regards to Myles Lewis-Skelly. We're going to try not to talk about strikers too much today, but it's inevitable, isn't it? We're going to mention them at some point. You're listening to another live episode of the Chronicles of AGUME with me, Harry Symeou. Let's get into it. Hey everybody, how are we doing? Happy Thursday and welcome back to another live episode of the Chronicles of AGUME podcast. With me, your host, Harry Symeou. The sun is shining. It's a beautiful, hot day in London, and I am loving it. Loving it. Bought the children a rather large-sized kids' pool for the garden the other day, and took a while to set it up and fill it up and all the rest of it. But it's so nice now that it's there and you're able to kind of dip in and cool off. And now that they're all at school, when I finish here, I'm not going to lie, I might jump in, make myself a nice iced coffee, put the sunglasses on, sit back, put a couple of tunes on and just chill out. I think that's what I'm going to do for the rest of the day. But that is before tonight. I'll be on TalkSport tonight on Transfer Insiders alongside Hugh Woozencroft. So a bit of work to come a little bit later on. And who knows, if we get a bit of break in transfer news, maybe you'll see me back here on the Chronicles of AGUME podcast. But look, I hope everybody's well. I hope everybody's good. If you're London-based, I hope you're enjoying the sunshine. If you're anywhere else, I hope the weather's treating you well and you're having a good time and not too stressed about Arsenal's striker situation, which I said we're not going to talk about too much today. I'm going to try and stick to that, but I know there'll be questions about it. I know it will come up in some kind of form. So why not just embrace it, I suppose. Okay, on today's show, we're going to talk Myles Lewis-Skelly. We're going to bring you the latest on his future. Looks like he's about to commit his long-term future to Arsenal, which is undoubtedly great news. We're going to discuss Carlos Cuesta's goodbye. We're going to talk a little bit about NIKO Williams, who appears to be heading elsewhere now. That looks like it's moving in that direction, which means Arsenal are pretty much definitely not going to sign him now. We're also going to talk a little bit about Lucien Agoume, the Sevilla central midfield player who's being linked with a move to Arsenal. Is he the Thomas Partey replacement? Should the Ghanaian leave this summer? We're still not any clearer with regards to what's going on with that. So we've got a busy show, jam-packed show. Let's dive into our first topic and let's start with the good news. Myles Lewis-Skelly has agreed a new deal with the Gunners. So Charles Watts broke the news yesterday in an exclusive. Myles Lewis-Skelly is very close to signing a new deal with Arsenal. The 18-year-old is set to get a substantial pay rise, and that will make him one of the best paid young players in the world. Now, when you think about that, you go, the first thing you do is you go, best paid young players in the world. Oh my God, he must be on mega money. No, look, the thing you got to realize and why you've got to understand that someone like Myles Lewis-Skelly was always going to get a substantial pay rise in a case like this is because he was probably on a pretty lowly contract in comparison to what some of his peers have got. And this is a guy who made 39 appearances last season across all competitions, very much a key part of the squad, very much an important player to us these days. I don't know what we'd have done without him, at left back, especially last season, because Ricardo Calafiori couldn't stay fit for love nor money, could he? So we're in a place where, you know, he's obviously emerged as a really important player, and he's a really bright talent. And we've talked about this a lot throughout the window so far. We've said, you know, actually a lot of the time when it comes to figuring out or trying to work out what it is that you're going to pay or you should be paying, a lot of the time we go, well, so much of it is based on potential, isn't it? So much of it is based on what that player could be and could end up being in the future, as opposed to maybe what they are right now. But in Myles Lewis-Skelly, you've got a player that is already performing at a really high level, that looks completely unfazed, that looks like he's ready to take on any challenge at anybody, at any place, at any time. Yet we know that there's probably still more to come from him as well. That's what makes this really exciting. His mother, Marsha Lewis, who's been talked about quite a bit as someone who's a big advocate of protecting young players. She's talked about the struggles that academy parents probably have to go through. And yeah, she's been a real kind of pioneer in that kind of space. Interesting that she was the one that negotiated the contract with Arsenal. He's had England call-ups already. I think for me, right, with Myles Lewis-Skelly, I love the player. I love what he brings. I love what he does. I have at times over the course of the last few months, looked back at certain actions that Myles Lewis-Skelly's, done, and I've said maybe I wouldn't have done that if I were him, and maybe I don't quite like that. And the reason I say that with some of the things is, like, sometimes it can be perceived as arrogance. Now, I don't for a second think that anyone arrogant gets that far. I think you need to be confident. I think you need to be self-confident. And I think Myles Lewis-Skelly is definitely that. But arrogance would suggest that you kind of believe that you don't need to do any work. And this is a kid that's put a hell of a lot of work in, clearly, because he's been improving week on week on week. And he's come in playing as a left back. It's not his natural position. He's had to adapt to that role. He's had to adjust to that role. Okay, you would argue at Arsenal that role is one that's maybe a slightly easier transition for a central midfield player of all positions to make because of the spaces that you're asked to occupy. But he still had to do that, and he still had to adapt and adjust to first team football, which is a much higher level than any of the academy stuff he would have been involved in the past. So arrogance is not the right word, but some of his actions could be perceived as arrogant. And I think I'm in this weird space where I don't want to take that edge away from him, because I think that's a big part of why he is who he is and why he seems so unfazed in those situations. But you do, as a footballer at the highest level, playing for a massive club, have to think about perception. And the reason you have to think about perception is because we know that the media are very, very quick to paint pictures. And they will paint you in a light that maybe doesn't necessarily represent who you are and what you are. And that can lead to negative press coverage, which can lead to certain narratives existing around players. And these narratives, they make a difference. How many times in the past did you see players that made horrible challenges, for example, in football games, really bad, on the border, really poor challenges, and people would turn around and say, yeah, but you know what, give him the benefit of the doubt. And I'll tell you why we should give him the benefit of the doubt, because he's not that type of player. What do you mean he's not that type of player? He's made a leg-breaking tackle. It doesn't matter who he is, what he is, or what he's done in the past. If it's a leg-breaking tackle, it should be punished. And the point I'm trying to make, and I use that as an example, is that narratives can shape the way that you're perceived, and the way you're perceived can have a big impact in how you're officiated, how opponents approach the game against you. That, football is a really, really complex game and a complex sport. There's a lot of stuff, that you need to kind of factor in. And it's not that I want to clip his wings. It's not that I want to take that edge away from him, but I think he needs to be a little bit careful sometimes in terms of how he contributes to the perception of him. So it's not a criticism. It's more a development area, and something that I think Myles Lewis-Skelly, probably as he grows older, he's just 18 years old. If I think about what I was like when I was 18 years old, I wasn't mature. I was actually a bit of an idiot, to be honest with you. So I think, for Myles Lewis-Skelly, it's important that he continues growing, and I'm sure he will. But those are just some bits of feedback that I would provide if talking about his kind of breakthrough season. In terms of what he was doing, in terms of his performances, outstanding, fantastic. The confidence he showed, brilliant. But again, even in that, if you do pick out or highlight a couple of the maybe not so good moments, it would come from him maybe trying to be too bold in certain situations, trying to be too brave. And in times when it works, it looks great, but you also kind of have to be able to differentiate between when's the right time to take the ball on and charge through the middle of the pitch, and when the right time is to look over your shoulder, realize you're the last man, and just play it that little bit safer. So yeah, I think there's still room for improvement, obviously, but he's a wonderful, wonderful player, and I'm delighted that we've seemingly got this deal done. We don't know the ins and outs in terms of what that salary is going to look like. We don't know the ins and outs in terms of exactly how long the contract is, but it looks like it's a long-term deal and that he's going to stay there. Arrogant, I don't think so, but he's got to watch that perception. Naive can be at times, but I understand that from an 18-year-old. The other big question around him, I guess, is where does his future lie in terms of position? Is he going to continue as a left fullback, or is he someone that we're eventually looking to push into the midfield? And we're going to talk about Thomas Partey in a little bit. Maybe you could make the case that because Thomas Partey's future at the time of recording is in the balance, Myles Lewis-Skelly is being looked at as one of the potential successors in that central area. Very good passer of the ball, loves to break the lines with his passing, very strong, very mobile, very confident. The only thing is he won't be able to do one of the things that I think really makes him stand out from the crowd as often and as much if he starts as a number 6. And that is his ability to carry the ball through the middle and through the thirds and into the opposition defensive third. I think when you're a left back coming inside and you're the spare man, it's kind of easy to go on that wander. And yes, okay, someone has to plug that hole at left back, but you're not vacating one of the primary defensive positions, which is in a central area right in front of your back line. So you wouldn't be vacating that area if you were doing that type of run and making it from the left-hand side coming in. When you're the 6, you can't do that as often. And so that would be an adjustment that he'd have to manage. Is he more of an 8? Some people are saying in the chat that he's more of an 8. Yeah, I think you could make the case that Lewis-Skelly is more of an 8, but we're talking about him in the context of potentially replacing Thomas Partey, because a lot of people are saying that actually one of the reasons Arsenal might be okay with allowing Thomas Partey to leave is because Myles Lewis-Skelly is there and that he can continue to develop and grow. So we'll see. We'll see how that goes. But obviously very, very positive news, and it's great to hear. So Myles Lewis-Skelly close to signing a new deal with the Arsenal. Carlos Cuesta has said his goodbyes ahead of taking over as the new Parma boss. We talked about this a little bit on yesterday's show, so I don't want to cover the same thing, but go over to his Instagram, have a little read of the message. He's very grateful to the football club, to Mikel Arteta in particular, and for all the people that he's worked with for kind of shaping him into the coach that he is today. And what an opportunity, man. That's 29 years old to be able to go manage a Serie A club, one with the history and the past of Parma is quite incredible. And you can't blame him, can you, for wanting to take that opportunity on. And we did talk a little bit yesterday about the trend in modern football now. You know, in the past, you used to get sort of managers from lower leagues kind of working their way up and eventually get into that elite level. And nowadays, although that pathway is still there, it's not a common pathway anymore. You tend to find, and you know, I don't mean this disrespectfully, but you tend to find that EFL managers stay within the EFL, and that the Premier League clubs and the clubs in some of the top leagues around Europe are actually more inclined to look into the staff pool of clubs that are doing particularly well. They're big on philosophy, so they look for coaches that have maybe attached themselves to managers whom they quite enjoy their style of play, etc., etc. And they'll normally go and do things like that. Bring in Carlos Cuesta. Enzo Maresca started like that. Mikel Arteta started like that. It's a real kind of common theme at the moment, isn't it? So, yeah, we'll see. We'll see how that develops. Leeds Gunner says, could Parma become Arsenal's feeder club in Serie A with Carlos there? I don't know about that, but I think there's obviously going to be an existing relationship, and that relationship is hopefully something that could be mutually beneficial to both clubs. Would we be able to send players out on loan to Parma, big club, Serie A, get the opportunity to learn, develop, improve, while they're not quite ready to play for us yet? Equally, if they've got a really exciting talent, would we kind of be at the front of the queue because of that relationship? Who knows? Hopefully, we can make it work to our advantage in some way, shape, or form. Right, we're going to talk Thomas Partey next. When I hit the go live button, I didn't have any update on Thomas Partey. When I hit the go live button, I was going to say to you guys that I have no idea where we're at on this. I was going to tell you that I'm growing frustrated. I was going to tell you that this is an issue that we really need to resolve, because if it's not one that we can get resolved, we're going to have to dip into the transfer market again. And we're going to have to go and bring in my opinion, a second midfielder on top of Martin Zubimendi. But since we went live, Fabrizio Romano has put out an update on Thomas Partey's future. We'll get into that right after this. Don't go anywhere. You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast.
You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner. Like and subscribe.
That's right. You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast with me, your host, Harry Symeou. We've got over 500 of you live with us right now on YouTube, but just, 69 likes on the board? Come on, guys. Let's drive those likes up. It's really, really important that we do that. It really, really, really does help. So smash that like button. It's completely free. It doesn't cost you a thing. Subscribe to the channel as well if you haven't done so already. If you're listening on audio, leave us a review. If you want to check us out on Patreon, you can do that. Our latest Patreon offering is a scouting video on Victor Gyökeres. Go over and check that out. The link is in the description below. Okay, so what has Fabrizio Romano said about Thomas Partey? Fabrizio Romano says that negotiations between Arsenal and Thomas Partey over a new deal are not advancing. No agreement so far, and now there is a concrete chance, he loves the concrete word, doesn't he, that the two will part ways in the coming days. Thomas would then be available as a free agent. What's my initial reaction to this? Now, this was put out at 10:04. It's 10:22 now while we're live. So this is a 15-minute-old update at the time of recording. What's my initial reaction to this? It's one of panic. I got to be honest. My reaction to the news that Arsenal are not progressing in talks with Thomas Partey is one of panic, because I think he's a really, really important player for us. He was hugely important for us last season. He was hugely consistent. He was one of our better players. I thought it was unfair that he wasn't talked about a little bit more in terms of the player of the season from an Arsenal perspective. And I think losing him, losing Jorginho on top of that, and bringing in just Martin Zubimendi actually puts us in a place as a squad where we're weaker. Now, Arsenal, in my opinion, if they do lose Thomas Partey, have to go out and bring in another midfield player. There'll be people out there that will tell you that actually, no, you know what? It's a position we can get buy-in, because Declan Rice could play in the 6 role, that Mikel Merino could play as the 8 in that case, that Kai Havertz will probably drop back to an 8 at times if we get ourselves the centre forward in that we're looking for, that Myles Lewis-Skelly could go into midfield if we need to do that. And I get where people are coming from, but I just think we really did learn last season, didn't we, that you need numbers. If you want to compete on multiple fronts, you need numbers, and numbers of good quality players that can come in and out of the team that can help you maintain a certain level, even when you're having to rotate, and even when you're having to play 3 games in the space of a week. I just don't see the sense in losing Thomas Partey. Now, is he demanding something in terms of the contract that Arsenal are just not willing to do? Maybe, in which case, what could that be? It's probably to do with the length of the contract. I'd imagine more than anything else. He has been speaking to Ghanaian television recently, and he did say something along the lines of, like, at this stage in your career, you know, it needs to be a contract that balances out everything. And I get that, but I don't know. I just think, for me, the money it's going to cost you to go out and bring in this other midfield player. And I know there's no guarantees around Thomas Partey and his fitness, but the fact that you're going to have to go out and get another player and try and find someone that's even close to that level means you're going to pay a lot of money. And I just would have liked to have seen him stay, so that the transition and the change and the renewal that we're going to experience in our midfield was just managed that little bit better. So I am worried about this, because I'm worried about what that means for us in that particular area of the park. And if we're sitting here saying Arsenal are, you know, and I said I wasn't going to talk about strikers too much. We'll try not to get into it too much. But if we're sitting here saying that Arsenal are not sure about paying 80 to 100 million euros for Benjamin Sesko, but we also want them to bring in a winger as well, and then on top of Martin Zubimendi, we're going to ask them and expect them to bring in another midfielder as well. It just doesn't all add up and compute in my mind. So I wanted us to keep Thomas Partey. Based on Fabrizio Romano's update, at the time of recording, it doesn't look like that's where this is heading. It looks like Thomas Partey could potentially be leaving Arsenal this summer. So, yeah, how do you feel about that? Let's get some of your thoughts and comments from the live chat. I'd love to hear from you guys as well. Inspired Channel says he is replaceable. We can get a younger profile. Yeah, I mean, he's replaceable, but how much is it going to cost you to replace him? And who is available for a reasonable price that is going to come in and bring you that level of quality and experience, would be my question. Lots of people are talking about Lucien Agoume, and we'll come on to talk about him in a bit, because he is on my agenda. I don't know a great deal about the player, but I did a little bit of digging this morning just to try and gauge a better understanding of who he is, where he comes from, what he's all about. And we'll do that in a little bit. Boston says people shouldn't be scared of change. It's time to refresh the midfield as well. Partey's 32 and injury prone. His legs are gone. Leeds Gunner mentioned Agume. We'll come on to him in a little bit. Tony Sunshine says he's gone. Partey will make money in Turkey, 300k a week. Can't blame him. Feels like a lot of players are choosing that route, right? We've seen it with Leroy Sané as well in the past week or so. Paul James says he wants a pay increase. It's his last big contract. Happy if he stays or goes. Alan O'Flynn says, good morning, Harry. Partey's been our best midfielder this season. It will cost us more to replace him. My thoughts exactly. Nelson says, people underestimate just how blessed we were to have Jorginho, Partey and Rice all in the squad. Bringing a Partey replacement would be way too costly. Look, I think we're already taking steps. We've already taken steps towards replacing Thomas Partey. Martin Zubimendi is seen, in my view, as a long-term replacement for Thomas Partey, right? But I just would have liked to have seen, with Zubimendi coming in, Partey still there, so that we could just breed Zubimendi into things and allow him to adapt and adjust while having that safety net of Thomas Partey, a man who's been there, done it, been around the block, understands the position to a T, and not just understands that role, but understands that role specifically within our system and what it takes to play that role for Arsenal. So, yeah, I'm a little bit disappointed. I got to be honest. But having said all of that, the counter argument and the counterpoint to the Thomas Partey thing and the idea of keeping him is that he's had a really good season fitness-wise last season. He's due a bad one, isn't he? And if we did sign him up to a new contract and he spent plenty of time on the sidelines again, I think there'd be frustration, and hindsight would mean and dictate that we're looking back on that and saying bad call, wrong call, etc., etc. So look, I've always said that I prefer to keep him, but I've always acknowledged and understood that in order to keep him, the conditions have to work for everybody, not just him. And clearly, there is a demand being made, or there is a want for something from Thomas Partey's side of things that Arsenal aren't willing to meet. And so we are where we are, and it looks like he's going to be on his way. Interesting update that. Maybe we'll have to change the title of this video or pod once we've finished live streaming. Just a quick reminder, leave a like on the video if you haven't done so already. Just 127 on the board, but nearly 700 of you with me live right now. Like, subscribe. You know the drill by now. I hate asking, but if I don't, we don't get anywhere near the volume of likes. And someone pointed out yesterday, I think it was Jid, in the chat, that what people are doing is liking in the live chat. No, you have to actually come out of the live chat and like the video itself. That's what I'm after. That's what really, really helps. Okay, short pause once again. And when we come back, we're going to bring you an update on Nico Williams. And we're going to talk Lucien Agoume. And that conversation becomes even more important now, doesn't it? And more relevant after that Thomas Partey update we received just a few moments ago. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to the pod. You're listening to the Chronicles of Aguna with me, Harry Symeou. Right. Nico Williams, a player that we seem to have been linked with forever, a player that many Arsenal fans would like to see come in at the football club. He was top of a lot of people's lists over the course of the last few months, but it seems like he is headed elsewhere. Now, in fairness, it's felt for a while that this was heading in this direction. We know that he was interested in a move to Barcelona last summer. Something broke down in those negotiations and that didn't happen. Arsenal were always said to be interested in the player throughout the course of last season, were said to be keeping tabs on him, etc., etc. But it looks now as if he's on his way to Barcelona to link up with some of his Spanish international colleagues and his pal Lamine Yamal. Yeah, not a bad player to link up with, is he? According to reports today, and those reports have come from multiple sources, but obviously Fabrizio Romano is the most prevalent of those, say that Nico Williams has agreed a 6-year contract with Barcelona, and it's now on Barcelona and Athletic Bilbao to figure out a deal between them. It's interesting because Joan Laporta as well, you know, everybody talks about Barcelona, their financial issues, the fact that they have to sell pretty much everything every time they want to do a deal. But he did say yesterday in an interview that they were close to completing their first big deal of the summer and that they still have flexibility. They've got a good relationship with La Liga, etc., etc. So it looks like this is what he was talking about. Nico Williams, we're going to miss out on him. How are people feeling about that? Let me know. I'm okay with it. I'm not going to jump up and down about it, and I'm not going to celebrate it because, as I keep telling you guys, if you go back a year, I was pretty big on Nico Williams. But last season put me off a little bit. Some of the demands have put me off a little bit. And yeah, I'm not going to say that I'll write off the player. I'm sure he'll be a huge success at Barcelona. I think he really will. But I don't know. There's something that doesn't sit right with me with the whole NIKO Williams thing and the way it was shaping up for us. So I'm not surprised that he's going elsewhere. But also, the thing that you'll get from a lot of people is, well, look, we didn't offer him what he wanted salary-wise, and we're allowing a very talented player to go off elsewhere and to sign for someone else. And to a point and to a degree, I agree with that. But it sounds like, doesn't it, that NIKO Williams always wanted Barcelona, that his heart was always set on Barca, that was where he wanted to end up. That's where he wanted to go. And it was just a matter of kind of when rather than if. And if that's the case, then there's only so much as a football club you can do, I suppose. So, yeah, Jeffrey sums that up nicely. He says, NIKO was never coming to Arsenal. He wants to play with his best friend, Yamal. There you go. Okay, shall we talk Lucien Agoume? As I say, even more of a relevant conversation now that Thomas Partey appears that he's on his way out of the football club. Not sure how I feel about that even still, even after trying to get all of that off my chest in the last 10, 15 minutes. Let's move on. Okay, so a player that's been mentioned as a potential replacement for Thomas Partey is Lucien Agoume, French under-21 international, a player that currently plays his football at Sevilla, 23 years old. I'm just looking down at my notes because I did make some notes on the player this morning. He signed for Sevilla from Inter last summer for about 4 million euros. He'd gone on multiple loan spells before eventually joining Sevilla from Inter. From what I've read about him, and I read a couple of scouting reports, I had a quick look at his FB ref page. Again, I'm not proclaiming to be an expert on this guy, but from what I kind of gathered, looks like a really good ball winner, likes to play predominantly in that 6th position. Based on what I've read, he appears to be a pretty good passer. But when I looked at his FB ref page and the scouting report specifically, that didn't really come through in the statistics. So I'll explain a little bit about what I mean there. So, for example, his pass completion rate was quite low. And that worries me. When you're a number 6, I think that you're in a really precious and precarious position. And if you lose the ball, you can put your team in quite a bit of trouble. So I always feel like a pass completion rate is really, really important for a number 6 specifically. If you're a left winger, I probably wouldn't look into your pass completion rate as much because I think in that area of the pitch, you got to take risks. And in order to impact the game, you're probably going to have to try things that won't always come off. Therefore, your pass completion rate can look quite poor. But as a 6 is quite an important stat to me, I think. But then when I dug into it a little bit deeper, he had a low number of passes attempted versus some of the other players that he's being compared to, some of his positional peers. Then I started to think about the club that he's playing for, and it dawned on me very, very quickly that Sevilla had a really bad season. Like they had a Tottenham-style season in the La Liga last season. They finished 17th. And so if they're not having a lot of the ball, if they're not building up much, if there isn't much going on in the team, how many opportunities is Lucien Agoume going to get on the ball and try and dictate? And if his team are not cohesive enough and things are breaking down, his pass completion rate could be impacted by that as well. So I don't want to write the guy off on that basis. It's just a very quick overview and a very quick bit of research that I've conducted on him. I'm sure there'll be others out there that can tell you a lot more. I know Clive and Elliot on the Arsenal Vision podcast did a scouting video on him yesterday. I haven't had a chance to watch that yet, but I will because their scouting videos are fantastic. So that might give me a little bit more of an indication as to where the player's at. Look, my overall very, very quickly drawn conclusion on this player is that he's one to develop. He's one to watch out for. The price that's being talked about in terms of what Sevilla would entertain for a potential sale is around about 20 million euros. I think that's mad over the top when you consider the financial situation and the desperation that they're experiencing right now, but also the fact that they paid 4 million for him last summer. I mean, has he been so good that his value has increased by 5 times from 4 million to 20 million. I don't know about that. There will be that Premier League premium that a club like Sevilla would be looking to slap on top if they were to sell to the likes of us. But first of all, the price thing is a bit of a worry for me. But if you really think he's the guy and you really think he's the solution and you've done that due diligence and done that research, then it's not the kind of figure that will put you off, is it? We paid around about that, I think, for Albert Sambi Lokonga, and that's not really worked out. And nobody seems to be particularly fussed about that or desperate to try and recoup some of that money. So one to develop, yes. But if he comes in and Thomas Partey goes, we're not better for it. Not now, anyway. Maybe in the future, you'd argue that we did a really good job of future-proofing and we let Thomas Partey go at exactly the right time and we picked up Lucien Agoume, for instance, if we were to proceed with this, at exactly the right time. And you'd look at it and you'd go, that's genius and it's brilliant and it's fantastic. But right now, as of today, on the 19th of June, 2025, at 10:38 in the morning, I can't sit here and tell you that I would believe we're better off for having Lucien Agoume over Thomas Partey. Now, that's not necessarily fair on the young lad either. I say young lad, he's 23, should be ready by now. It's not fair on him in the sense of I'm holding him up to a very, very high standard in Thomas Partey, who for me was one of our top 3 players last season and has been one of the top 6s in European football, I would argue, for the past 3-4 years, obviously with the caveat of when fit. So I realized that I'd be holding this young man up to a really, really high standard. But I'm thinking about it through an Arsenal perspective. I want us to be the best possible team we can be. And Agoume for Partey right now wouldn't convince me that we're in a better position or in a better state. And I'm interested to get you guys' thoughts on this as well. Let's dive into the live chat and see what some of you guys are saying. Paul James says he'll be sold for less than 20 million. Boston says he's very good, a proper talent. When I said 20 million, I meant euros, by the way. DJ Ashby says, do you think Mikel might move Rice into 6 if we can't find anyone in this window and get an 8 in the window, as there is probably more on the market for that position compared to a 6? Yeah, maybe. And you could argue that he might use Havertz in that position. I don't think that's where Havertz should be used, and I personally wouldn't do it. But that's, you know, that's a possibility. I'm not saying it's what I would do, but it's a possibility. But listen, I don't know about Rice as a 6. Like, Rice historically was a very good 6. And when he did the job for us at times of need, he did it very, very well. And there was a long period where he was doing it, not so much last season, but the season before when Thomas Partey was out, and he did it impeccably well. But I think that Declan Rice, I think that you lose some of what Declan Rice is great at when you play him as a 6 in our team, because we're a team that faces low blocks a lot. So you need a 6 that can break lines with his passing, that's a little bit cuter in his distribution. Whereas I think, and it's not to criticize Declan Rice, I just think he's at his best when he's picking up the ball and carrying it rather than trying to thread it through the eye of a needle. And for that reason, I think him playing further up the pitch gives him that freedom to do that. It gives him the ability to box crash, which I think is something that he's really improved on lately. And his goal scoring numbers tell you that. And I just think we're onto something with Declan Rice as a slightly more advanced player. He also gives you that balance, because on the other side where we've got a really attack-minded 8, to have one on the other side that can be attack-minded, but can also go, I need to tuck in and help the 6, and has that skill set to do that and is very commanding and dominant defensively, I think that gives us a really, really nice balance. I'm not sure personally I would want to upset that balance, but that's just me. That's just me. Some people joking, Lokonga coming back like a new signing, guys. Doshi very unhappy with Partey picking up a stupid yellow card in the quarterfinals of the Champions League. He says, get some new blood. He got a stupid yellow card in the quarters and screwed us over. I was annoyed about that, I got to say, but it doesn't impact on my view as to whether or not I think we should keep him or not. But again, look, we don't know the ins and outs. We don't know what the demands are, and we don't know how far apart the club and Thomas Partey's people are at the moment. It's all information that we just don't have, so we'll have to wait and see. Kian says, Harry, do you think Douglas Luiz can be an option for us? He's a player that we looked at in the past, and you know, I'm not sure if that interest still exists, but we'll see. we'll see if that's a name that comes up. I'm sure it will. Duncan says, using the word arrogant to describe Myles Lewis-Skelly instead of confident says more about your attitude than Myles Lewis-Skelly's attitude. In your position, you should choose your words better, please. If you go back to what I actually said, I said, is he arrogant? And I said, I don't think he's arrogant, because to get to that level and to improve that much, you can't be arrogant because you need to put work in. And to say someone's arrogant suggests that they think they can just coast by. What I said, if you go back and actually listen to it, is that overconfidence and some of the things he does can be perceived as arrogance, and perception is very, very important, because perception drives narrative. Narrative impacts a lot of things. That's what I said on Myles Lewis-Skelly, just to clarify. Come on, man. At least listen to what I said before coming at me for it. Right, guys, should we take some questions, some thoughts from the live chat? If you haven't done so already, please do leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel. If you're new, there's over 800 of you with me live right now, which is amazing. Considering we're not talking Sesko or Gyökeres. So get involved, check us out on Patreon, all the rest of it. And short pause when we come back, your questions answered here on the Chronicles of Aguna Pod. Don't go anywhere. Okay, let's go into the live chat for the last 10 or so minutes. Ian Roy bringing up Rodrigo. Do you think Rodrigo stays? And even if he leaves, do you think it's possible to buy Rodrigo while keeping both Martinelli and Trossard? I think one of the reasons Arsenal, in my opinion, and this is just my opinion, would be willing to move for Rodrigo is because not only is he a left winger, but he can play as a right winger, as we've seen, very, very competently. And that means that you're essentially plugging a couple of positions. And I think we've seen from Arsenal in recent years that versatility is pretty high up their want list. And if they feel a player can help them in multiple areas, they tend to be more open to spending the big bucks. So, look, I think Rodrigo's better off the left. If he came in, I'd want him to start from the left. I'd want Saka to start from the right, and whoever our centre forward, if we get one, I'm hoping we get one. I mean, surely we're going to get one. Whoever that centre forward is would be my centre forward. So we're talking about regeneration in the midfield. There'd be quite the regeneration in the attack as well, wouldn't they, if we bought a starting winger and a starting centre forward in. So it's all change at the moment. But just going back to Rodrigo, I think because he can play both sides, I think there'd probably be a little bit more openness to doing that. But again, we did our transfer rumor ratings episode the other day. I rated this as a 4 out of 10 in terms of how likely it is to happen. I haven't budged on that. Despite some of the reporting, despite some of the noise, I haven't budged on that at all. So I'm going to stay with that. We did get a super chat. Let me just bring that up. Mr. Iguana says, bear with me a second. He likes Lamine Camara, who is a Monaco player at the moment. He says he likes him. He's a Brighton type future gem. Interesting. We'll keep an eye on his career. I don't know a great deal about him, to be honest. I had to Google him just there to work out who he played for. So that says where my knowledge on the player is. But I'll take your word for it, and let's have a look into him and get an understanding of who he is. Jid says, versions of this question have been asked before, but knowing that Arsenal are not going to sell a lot of players, e.g. Nelly and Trossard are likely to stay, and we aren't going to buy 4 marquee players. Can you give your realistic wish list of who you would sign based on what's most likely to happen in the summer and not what you hope happens? It's really tough because you don't know what the reality of every situation is, do you? Until, things happen and things develop. I don't think it's out of the question that we sign Rodrigo. At this stage, I'm not going to say it's the most likely outcome, but I'd like to see us really push to get him in. And whether we get Sesko or Gyökeres, I'm not really that fussed. To be honest, that's what I've kind of come to in terms of my own mind on this, because one day I'm like, yeah, Sesko's the one. And the next day I'm like, no, actually, you know what, Gyökeres. I started with Sesko, then I went to Gyökeres, back to Sesko, back to Gyökeres. I like them both. I think if you could get Rodrigo in, that is a real needle moving signing. And so I would prioritize that. And then I'd bring in whichever striker is affordable out of those two, because I think I'd rather spend the bulk of the money on a player that I truly believe is a needle mover rather than a player that I'm not sure about. So let's see. Bengal Boy says, is Isak to Liverpool legit? I'll be honest, I haven't heard anything to suggest that is a goer. Everything that I've been told and everything that I've heard when looking into this stuff is that Newcastle have no appetite to sell whatsoever. Not to Arsenal, not to Liverpool, not to Man United, not to Chelsea, not to anyone, not to Real Madrid. So I don't think he's going to move this summer. I think with them having Champions League football, I think that's kind of kept him there. I think that would be enough, I think, to satisfy his desire to play in Europe's premier competition. Leeds Gunner says, Garetsas, we were linked with him earlier. Is it all fluff? As I said to you guys at the time, I tracked down the guy that reported the story initially, spoke to him about it. He said that it was legit. He said that there was a genuine interest. He said that they'd gone as far as getting to the point where they were talking about a fee. I spoke to another Greek journalist, Kostas Lianos, who's been on the show a couple of times. We did a Garetsas video with him actually just a few weeks ago. And he said like what he was hearing was that this is nothing to be excited about. And I tend to agree with him in terms of what the last few weeks have shown us, but also in terms of, I'm not writing off the other guy and I'm not criticizing him. I don't know him, but I know that Kostas Lianos is pretty good. So I'm inclined to believe him, and I'm inclined to say as a result of that this is not something that's moving or going anywhere, to be honest. Neil D'Souza says, why are we not looking at Retegui? Classic number 9, strong aerial threat, sharp in the box, got poaching instincts, high presser, aggressive. He might cost 60 mil. I think he's a player that Serie A fans like quite a bit. Retegui, I've seen him a fair bit over the last couple of years, and I'll be honest, he's a player I can't make my mind up on. There are times where I look at Retegui and I think, yeah, really, really good player. He's obviously Argentinian, but has declared for Italy. When I watch him, I don't find him particularly good on the eye. But then you look at his goal scoring record last season: 25 league goals and 8 assists in 38 appearances. That's 33 goal contributions in 36 appearances in one of Europe's top 5 leagues. 3 goals in 10 in the Champions League. He's got a really, really, really strong record. Really strong record. And yeah, on that basis, you've probably got a point there. Is he one that we should be looking at? Maybe we should. But I just, when I look at Retegui, when I watch him in full, I struggle a little bit. And it's a bit like Rafael Leao as well, right? Rafael Leao is one of those players that when you watch him for 90 minutes, you'll probably experience 6, 7, 8 moments where you feel huge frustration. But if you watch the highlights, you'll go, my God, this guy's incredible. And if you look at the return in terms of his outputs, again, you'll go, my God, this is incredible. So it's an interesting one, isn't it? Numbers wise, Retegui looks the business and it's probably worth looking at, but it doesn't feel like I'm fine with us expanding the search and looking elsewhere, but it feels very much like it is going to be Sesko or Gyökeres at the moment. We've had no indication otherwise. So I'm inclined to think that's the way we're going to go. Okay, guys, I think I'm going to leave it there. Thank you all so much for joining me. As always, don't forget to leave a like on the video. Can we get to 300 likes by the time I hit the end stream button? That would be amazing. We're not that far away. There's about 800 of you with us live right now on YouTube. Thank you for your love, for your support. Really, really appreciate it. All the interaction in the live comments as well. Like, subscribe, leave us a review, check us out on Patreon, and we'll speak a little bit later on. Maybe there'll be some breaking news. Maybe we'll have something to discuss. Who knows? I'll speak to you all soon. Until the next one, take care of yourselves. Have a wonderful day. Goodbye.